Today, we've got Matt Ferguson from MDF Coaching and Consulting. He's going to be talking about some of his leadership tips and tricks. He's been in leadership for over a decade and has tons of experience in the sales and leadership world. I asked him for a quick mission statement, and the one that stood out was culture eats strategy for breakfast. I love that. Very true. I believe that as well. I think it's awesome. But culture transformation, employee engagement, change management, leadership development, these are all your specialties. So I appreciate you being here with me today. We're going to kick this off in just a second with the three questions. So I'll hit you with the first one. How do you develop trust and psychological safety in your organization while maintaining high performance standards?
I think the key to this is actually listening to your people. I've learned this the hard way, where I can tell you, and we were talking about this a little bit before we went live here, and it's one of the things you've noticed, and it's one of the things I noticed because I noticed in myself. Top performers get promoted into leadership,
Hmm.
and they almost all do the same thing. And I'm telling you, I was one of the worst in this when it happened over 10 years ago, which was I outperformed everybody by 2 to 3 times, which means I thought that I was the best, which could have been argued that I was, and I thought I was the only one that knew how to do things. So, when I get moved into the position, I immediately go in and tell everybody how I do it and try to get them to do what I do.
Right.
But nobody could do what I do because I talk to people differently, and I will say things that nobody else would ever say to anybody, and y most people can't do that. Now, what I failed to realize, and it took me way too long to figure this out, is that other people have strengths too.
Hmm.
And when I think back, especially my first year or 2 in leadership, if somebody came to me and brought me an idea or had a problem or had a challenge, I would basically just say, "No, go work harder. This is how you do it, and this and that." And when you talk about psychological safety, all that happens there is people will stop coming to you because they don't trust you, because they know that they're gonna get the same answer every time, and they can't really do what you want them to do, so why would they bring that to you? To me, the answer to this is actually listening, understanding the problem, understanding the perspective that it comes from, and actually doing something to help the situation versus not listening or listening and not doing anything. So I think one of the biggest parts of being a leader is listening, understanding, and how do you make people's lives better and easier.
Yeah, being present is a big part of that too. It's a lot of leaders that are listening to respond and not listening to understand. And I think that psychological safety comes from that listening to understand and then taking that information and growing off of it. Awesome. What role does storytelling play in your leadership style, and how has it helped you create stronger connections with your team?
Well, I like this question. And
I'm glad you picked it. I like it too.
sto- sto- storytelling was always how I sold. Okay. I've been told that I'm a good storyteller. When I think back to leading and running a team, one of the things that leaders forget is that they're not selling their clients anymore. They're actually selling their team.
Right.
And one of the things my clients struggle with is they wonder why nobody listens or does what they want them to do, but they have no explaining why people are doing things or what problem this is supposed to be solved. We talked about pointless metrics before. If you have the wrong metrics in place and people are like, why would I ever do that? It's not going to do anything. Like, that's the thing, right? So I'm telling you, this is one of the most forgotten things that leaders forget about is you should look at your reps like your clients, and you should constantly be selling every day. And one of the questions that I ask is, why do you want to get into leadership? The answer I get a lot, which I hate, is, oh, I just want to get out of the grind of selling. And I'm like, the grind of selling. Just wait. Because when you
Yeah.
have 10, 15 people looking at you and you can't get them to listen to you, or that you're not doing, like, you have to sell them every single day into why. And just like I used with clients, I use that with teams all the time, the story and relating to why we have to do things, why we're doing it this way, and relate it to some story,
Yeah.
why we're doing that.
You have the emotional elephant, and the little logical donkey, and they're both pulling the cart, and the elephant wants to go right, the donkey wants to go left. Guess who's going to win, right? Somebody taught me that a long time ago. And in leadership, it's the same thing. You have to get the psychological, the why, to be fully bought into before you can get any kind of results. It's awesome.
Yeah, and the why isn't why you think it should be done that way. It's just like selling anything else. It's like, okay, here's the problem that we're having. Here's what we can do about it. All that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I only know that I worked for one of the best leaders ever at selling to a team that I can remember meeting with him and being like, "Oh my God, we're gonna change this." He's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." He's like, "I got that all taken care of." And people would walk out of that meeting like, "Oh my God, this is great. We get to change this and go do that," versus being scared and not wanting to do something. But it's
Yes,
an art.
it
It's
is.
an art to be able to do that.
But and in change management, that storytelling and getting the why and getting that full buy-in is a huge part of that. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
for sure.
I love this question too. In a world dominated by AI and metrics, how do you maintain the human element in your leadership approach while still driving results?
There's a guy on LinkedIn named Kevin Dorsey, who's one of the biggest sales leadership influencers on LinkedIn. I've stole this from him. Okay. But I've messaged him. He knows I use it.
Yeah,
And he has two buckets. One's being a micromanager, and the other one's being micro aware. Okay. Understanding the metrics and what's really going on is what you need to be able to do, which is being micro aware. So, like, you understand every person, you understand what they're good and what they're bad at. You know what you have to worry about and what you don't. Because I think where people get in trouble with metrics is that they think metrics are the end all be all of everything. So if
right.
this says X, this means Y, right? But that could mean that for one person, but it doesn't mean that for the other person. Let's say you have a top performer, and this is one I hear all the time, Carl. I literally hear this once a month from a client. And it's this person doesn't do what they want to do, but somehow they always get lucky and hit their number. And I'm like, well, they just have a different way of hitting their number than you like of how they do it.
Yeah.
So you getting on them for not making calls or not having a certain amount of meetings is actually all it's doing is making them mad, and they probably don't want to work for you anymore. But you have to know each individual person and how the metrics work and what they mean and the cause and effect for each person, or else you get screwed on both sides of it because you make somebody mad, and then you should be mad at somebody that you're not mad at because they're doing the things that they want you to do, but they aren't equaling the results. So I look at metrics that way because I believe if you're micro aware about everything that's going around and understanding every cause and effect of every person, that's what people want versus the person that just looks at the number and be like, "Oh, well, why did you do this?" And be like, "You're really asking me that?"
I like that. And I think it's funny because, and I can say this out loud now because I'm no longer there, but I distinctly remember having this conversation with almost every single rep that I had when I was at the other corporation. And I would tell them, look, the spreadsheet needs to be clean for Denver. So keep the things in the green, push the buttons that need to be pushed, but go do what you're doing because that's what you're good at. I had this guy in Buffalo. He was an all-star salesperson. He could sell ketchup popsicles to the lady in white gloves, in a Buffalo winter and be fine with it, right? He was old school, knocking on doors, literally walking around talking to people. He was our wholesale rep, so he would walk around the box store and just talk to people and take them out and sell them a building, you know. And Oh, well, he's not making calls. He's not doing all these activities. He's in the store selling.
Right.
If that's what he's doing and it's working, it's fine. He did $1 million in sales, just one guy. I'm good with it. You know, let him
But
sell.
that's the part that the people that are removed away from it don't understand, which
Yeah.
is you figure out what people are good at and you get them doing more of that,
But the KPI needs to be green because all the leaders' bonuses were tied to having green KPIs.
which is a problem in itself because if you're paying attention to the wrong things, people are just going to do them and they're not going to equal the result that you want anyway.
Right.
And that's why metrics, there's a book called Metrics That Matter. I think that's what it's called, but like you have to figure out what actually works for certain people and get them to do more of that.
Yeah. I laughed because I had a 45% growth rate on my team for 4 years in a row, but our sales KPIs were always red. We had the highest growth rate in the country. Sales KPIs were always red. And I always
I've
got
always
beef about it. I get calls all the time from VPs. What's going on with your team? They're selling. Who cares?
right. I've always looked at that the same way.
Like the comp dollars are there, so what are we worried about? You know?
You, you have a process that you put in place, right? And if I have somebody that wants to fight me on, be like, go hit your number. Like if you can
Yeah.
hit your number, I actually don't care. But here's the thing. If you don't, then we're probably gonna have some issues. So
Well, and that's that micro aware. That's exactly what you were talking about. If your micro awareness is there, you can coach that person through why they didn't hit their numbers.
correct.
It,
The,
it,
the
it
key the
yeah,
key is having the structure in place and be like, look, I know this is what needs to be done to hit your number. If you have a better way of doing it, go knock yourself out. But you got to be able to perform.
well, and it gives you a little insight that micro awareness from a leadership standpoint can give you a little insight into how things are going with that person. So if you have a true performer, a lot of leaders fall into the trap where they spend 80% of their time with their bottom 20%, right?
Yes.
So and I know that's a that's a whole nother topic for a different day. But when you do have those one-on-ones with your top performers and you're calling them, you should be doing it once a week. That's just my opinion. But you're having that quick chat with them. By being micro aware of things that are going on, you can notice the subtle changes and you can question how things are going and you learn things about people. You learn, oh, well, my son was in a car accident last week. And you wouldn't ask that if you approach it from the micromanaging standpoint, because you come in from a different angle, right? You come in with, hey, your numbers are down. They've been down for 2 weeks. What's the problem? Well, I'm already defensive as the rep, right? So, so you already lost me. Whereas the micro awareness gives you the ability to come. I love that answer. That was awesome.
Well, just to add on the defensiveness, right?
Hmm.
I'm telling you, if you're having accountability meetings or one-on-ones, whatever you call them, and you have people that are defensive, you're doing something wrong.
Right.
Because the fact of the matter is everything should be sent in facts, right? And when the facts are laid out, there's no reason to be defensive. It just is what it is.
Right.
And the defensiveness leads to emotion, and emotion leads to disaster. And I promise you, my first year or two, I was subjective and emotional, which is probably the worst thing you could be as a manager ever.
Right.
And if you are that, you have to change that by getting objective. It doesn't mean the emotion's always going to be gone, but that takes a lot of the emotion out of it. But if your people are defensive all the time, I feel bad for you, but it's your fault.
Exactly. Exactly. I had an old timer. I don't know. This was 2010. I had an old timer tell me, the second you realize everything's your fault is the
I,
second your life will change. And
it
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 did.
does.
It made a huge difference in everything in my world, you know?
I don't know how long I've thought that way, but I've thought that way a long time, which by the way can be a burden, but it really causes you to look at it and be like, all right, this actually is my fault. So how do I fix it? Because the other person thinks it's your fault and they are not going to fix it and they're waiting for you to fix it.
Right. But it gives you that introspective moment where you can actually just kind of collect it all and figure it out, which is
Correct.
super
Yeah.
valuable. That's
Yeah.
self-awareness, part of that EQ, IQ,
It's
SQ, you know.
it's a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge. Well, awesome. I really appreciate the time today. I know you and I could probably talk for the entire afternoon.
Thanks for having
It-
me on. I appreciate it. Let me know if
yeah.
there's anything I can do to help.
And ditto.
For sure.